Curumo, Olorin, Aiwendil, Alatar, and Pallando. These are the Istari or wizards in Tolkien's lore. They aren't your average run-of-the-mill abracadabra wizards. These 5 Maiar selected by the Valar formed the Istari. They were sent to Arda by the Valar to help the peoples of Middle-earth. They were sent as advisors to the men and elves to resist Sauron. But why were these powerful Maiars only sent to advise and not actively use their powers to stop and confront Sauron? Were the Istari successful in accomplishing this mission? Today on Fantasy Archive, we go over these questions and how these wizards used their powers during their time in Middle-earth. Let's start from the beginning. In the Third Age of Middle-earth, the Order of the Wizards, or the Heron Istarian, was delegated to 5 Maiar in the Undying Lands. The wizards were known as Istari in Quenya and the Ithrin in Sindarin. Manwë, leader of the Ainur and the king of Valar, learned that the first Dark Lord's loyal successor, Sauron, was coming back to power. A council was called and it was decided that the Valar would send 3 messengers to Middle-earth to protect the free peoples. Only 2 Maiar came. Orome sent Alatar, known as Morenatar, and Ale sent his Maiar, Curumo, later called Saruman by men and Curunr by elves. Ironically, Sauron had served as Ale's Maiar in the beginning of days. For the 3rd messenger, Olorin was summoned by Manwë. Olorin, later known as Gandalf to men and Mithrandir to elves, was Manwë and Queen Varda's Maiar. When Olorin confessed he feared he was too weak to face Sauron, Manwë said that was all the more reason for him to go and help the free peoples to resist the Dark Lord. Olorin was then commanded by Manwë to go, but Queen Varda said not as 3rd. So Yavanna asked Curumo or Saruman to take Aiwendil Radagast along. Alatar took his friend Pallando. Pallando was also Orome's Maiar. Together, Alatar and Pallando were called the Ithrin Luin or Blue Wizards. Each went to the east and south and didn't make any appearance in major events of Middle-earth. The wizards were only sent as messengers or advisors to influence the peoples through persuasion and encouragement and not force or fear. Their powers were restricted and they were forbidden from dominating the free peoples on Middle-earth or leveling up their power with that of Sauron, who was also a Maiar. If they broke the rules, they would be cast out and their forms would fade. The Valar feared what may come of the races of Middle-earth. If either Valar or Maiar interfered, they had already destroyed much of Middle-earth in the past when natural disasters unraveled and a lot of Middle-earth submerged after the War of Wrath. Yes, the wizards were sent with a staff in their hand towards an arduous task of being mortals with a mission of goodwill, under strict guidelines from which they were not to falter. Each wizard appeared in the form of an old man and each had their special powers. Their physical appearance allowed them to blend in with the races on Arda and seem non-threatening. The wizards were arrayed in different colors and known by various names. Saruman was the wizard in white clothes. White indicated he was the chief. Radagast in brown, Gandalf in gray, and seemingly the oldest among the wizards. Whether the colors had anything to do with their rank or abilities is not known. Their clothes covered their form, which was that of old men. Hence, they were prone to all the weaknesses that men's physical bodies underwent, such as pain, hunger, greed, sorrow, and joy. Just as men would feel positive and negative emotions, we see Gandalf having great affection for the hobbits, and Saruman falling into greed and the lust for power. It is also hinted that the Blue Wizards too fell prey to temptations when they traveled to the east. The wizards, unlike men, aged very slowly. Despite being owners of the body of mortal old men, they were the most powerful beings to walk on Middle-earth. They could be wounded and killed, but death was temporary. They would return to the Timeless Halls, where the Valars would send them back until their mission was complete, such as Gandalf, who was killed when he defeated the Balrog of Moria. He was returned to Middle-earth and resurrected by Iluvatar himself. When the mission was completed, each wizard would return to the Timeless Halls for good, except for Gandalf, who was allowed to enter Valinor. Not only were the wizards physically strong, but they also had magical powers which they could perform with or without their staff, such as healing, ensnaring mines, hurling enemies, etc. They were warriors, adept to the use of weapons and amazing swordsmanship. However, all these powers were to be used as a last resort. Middle-earth's inhabitants were not aware of who the wizards were, except for Círdan, who was at the Grey Havens when the wizards arrived. He told Elrond and Galadriel. The information was highly confidential. Initially, men believed that the wizards were also men who acquired great knowledge of lore and arts. As the Third Age passed, men began to believe they were elvenkind. Hence, Olorin was named Gandalf by men, which meant wand elf. However, many had questions about who they were due to their nature. The very perceptive elves had a lot of questions for them. The wizards' magic, physical, and mental gifts didn't match that of men. The elves respected them, but were not keen on taking the wizards' counsel. They believed they were far superior to the wizards. On the other hand, dwarfs and hobbits were not so close to them. They saw them as magicians who were a cause for trouble and therefore kept their distance. Men interacted with the wizards but not as much as the elves. They took the wizards for extraordinary beings with vast knowledge and respected them, but feared they would eventually have a command over them if they were to accept their guidance. Hence, there was a lack of trust. Saruman was the head of the White Council and was granted the greatest power among the 5 Istari, a group of wise men to counter Sauron. However, Saruman became filled with pride and envy of Gandalf's reputation, wisdom, and purity of spirit. Saruman was corrupted by the desire for the rings of power and the influence of Sauron through Palantir. Eventually, he assisted Sauron in the War of the Ring, betraying his original purpose on Middle-earth. Saruman was ultimately defeated by the Ents. His staff is broken by Gandalf, who also cast him out of the White Council. Saruman then moved to the Shire with plans to take over, but he was killed by his servant, Wormtongue, in the Shire after the One Ring was destroyed. A wind from the west, probably Manwë himself, dispersed his spirit. At the time when Saruman was ensnared by the power of the ring, and after the defeat of the Balrog of Moria, Gandalf had returned to Middle-earth as Gandalf the White. With the support of the elf Galadriel, he was appointed as head of the White Council and led the Order of the Istari. Gandalf led the west against Sauron and defeated him. After this, the Order of the Wizards came to an end as the mission they were sent for was now complete. Gandalf passed over the sea with the last writing of the Keepers of the Ring. Radagast initially stayed true to his mission. He played his role as a messenger to Gandalf from Saruman, who also instructed the birds in his service to assist both Gandalf and Saruman. He eventually became captivated by the beasts and birds and may have strayed away from his purpose and failed his mission. He lived at Rhosgobel near the borders of Mirkwood. It is also said that he may have chosen to work with animals to complete his mission, but it proved less effective than working directly with the races of Middle-earth. The 2 blue wizards may have fallen to temptations and were corrupted by Sauron. It is said that they gave rise to magical cults in the east and south. There is also a counter-argument that says that it is probably their influence in those regions that helped with the victory in the War of the Ring. Unlike the other wizards, it was only Gandalf who truly stayed true to his task. He never faltered. Although he was a mighty wizard, possessed a strong body, and prodigious swordsmanship, he always relied on his wisdom, quick thinking, and logic to face challenging situations head-on. It is also worth noting that out of all wizards, it was Gandalf who wouldn't hesitate to use weapons when the need arose. He was indeed a true warrior, a true leader, a true friend, a true wizard.